Hello, and thanks for joining us for this month's edition of The Scope of Things, a no-nonsense look at the realities and enigmas of clinical research, based on those closest to the action who aim for great and, if need be, are willing to shake things up. I'm Deborah Borfitz, Senior Science Writer for Clinical Research News. In today's episode, I'll be speaking with Dr. ARTURO Loaiza-Bonilla, co-founder and Chief Medical Officer of Massive Bio, which is taking a unique and decidedly, but not entirely, high-tech approach to matching cancer patients to clinical trials. Welcome to the podcast, Arturo.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to have a conversation today about clinical trials.
Okay. It is said that connecting the right cancer patients to the right cancer trials is like finding the proverbial needle in a haystack. And I'm wondering why that is, and whether the reasons extend beyond the fact that people newly diagnosed with cancer are probably scared and treatment often must happen immediately. What do you have to say?
Yes, I think one of those issues is exactly what you're saying in terms of lack of knowledge, right? So to me, it's all about awareness in the first place. We know, and we have, talking with many patients before, including in my practice, I still have a skin in the game, even though I'm working at Massive Bio. But one of the first barriers is that many of those patients don't have that conversation with their, medical oncologists. And it makes sense because we as oncologists, imagine, we're seeing 80 patients a week, right? So we're pretty busy. We're generalists in many cases. I had the privilege to work before in an academic center. And even then, I didn't know what trial was available for, a patient with a specific biomarker or where something different, what I was super specialized on at my cancer center. So we're basically at the whim of either the practice in the community, which is the 85% of the whole United States, which is being taken care of there, that have no trials available for them. And they see it mostly as a Hail Mary, as a last, resort for their patients. And then once on the other side, on the academic centers, they are constrained by the few trials they have for the specific disease or biomarker or research interest. And also comes down to whatever that provider is doing that day. If we are busy, then we may not have the chance to talk to the patients about clinical trials. We may say, well, go to clinicaltrials.gov and find them, right? If you want to learn more. Or go to the patient advocacy group. And patients are too busy. They're facing with cancer. So it's so challenging to think that they're going to be able to just juggle another thing that they have no idea what's about. And they need information, they need resources and support. So that just by itself, it's a major barrier, but there is a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel. There's some data reporting that if the patients before the first appointment have knowledge of the potential clinical trials they may be eligible for upon the visit, you can increase adoption of the trial and enrollment by 50%. So at least half of the patients, just by knowing there's an option for them to look into, they're really open to go for it. So I think that's just the first component. And of course, there's other things that we can discuss along the conversation, which is trust and, access to resources to actually make it to the trial and other barriers that are happening along the way. But I think the first thing is we need to create this communication channel for all patients to know what the options are in front of them. And that was one of the reasons why we wanted to do this in Massive Bio, kind of like empower patients with information and then help them further by use technology to at least do this at scale.
Right. And of course, in overcoming all of the other things that are more probably top of mind for patients and doctors, both at any one point in time, and certainly when they're talking to one another about that potential opportunity or not, because they're thinking about other things. Right. I want to ask you about, President Biden reignited earlier this year this cancer Moonshot program, and the goal, of course, was reducing the cancer death rate and pretty optimistically within the next 25 years in a pretty big way. And the emphasis was put on the role that Americans themselves can play in the effort, taking better care of themselves, as well as participating in research. Do you know if this approach, and it began back with President Obama, has helped improve awareness of clinical trials among cancer patients or in any way move the needle on their participation? Did it matter?
I think it mattered. But of course, as everything, there's room for improvement. And I also think that is because of that issue related to where research is being conducted. So I really love the fact that, President Obama and President Biden and the offices of, subsequent presidencies have tried to continue those efforts in some extent. But something I saw, having been in both sides of the spectrum in terms of being in academics and also in the community-based practice, actually one that does research, is that most of these efforts for the Cancer Moonshot have been dedicated for those, 15% elite NCI designated comprehensive cancer centers, which is a great place to be. I mean, I love the research and the opportunities for new innovations coming from those places. However, the community is where the patients are in most cases. So I think that one of the issues has been that all the awareness has been done is like, come to these big places, this is the great place for you to come for your clinical trials, and making investments in those blue ribbon committees, and that have been really successful in terms of creating new collaborations. But once again, those networks have been mostly done at that kind of quote unquote elite, and those many patients who don't have the exposure to those centers, or they don't even understand what that really means for them, are missing that chance. So I think it has moved the needle for awareness. I think President Biden has been one of those advocates and champions for cancer care because of his personal and family history with cancer. And I love the fact that he's doing all that, but I feel that there's a lot of opportunities that could be done on the first technology side, interoperability, and getting that research to where the patients are, right? So meeting them where they are, and unlike the current process, which is patients going to where you put in the money on.
Yeah, so not a lot of money being poured into the fundamental problem of recruiting patients for oncology trials versus writing these huge checks to specific programs for, prevention, detection, diagnosis, and control, all of that, which is important, but it doesn't get to the fundamental problem of recruiting patients for trials. And so the question is, who's talking to the president about this? Anybody? You?
well, if you're listening, President Biden,
we can only hope.
Exactly. Well, some advisor may be listening to this, or someone who knows him or his team. I think there's some voices in the community, maybe on the patient advocacy side, that are talking about improving access, removing disparities, and promoting equity. But I think that they may not be focused on research. They may be kind of like multilateral, right? When you have these discussions, you don't have a specific item that you want to bring to the president. I mean, I do have it, but other folks may be interested in having a much more holistic approach to cancer care, and that may dilute the message around research in the community. So if I may have that voice, I will say thank you for all the efforts that have been done in working with the communities and also with the large cancer centers. But let's connect the dots. Let's look at the data since the inception of the Moonshot, and see how has this really improved access to clinical trials for populations that were already outside of the catchment populations of those centers, right? So they can always pull out the metric and say, oh yeah, we're accruing more patients, yeah, more volume, and we're not, but is it really representing more equity, right, for those who never had the chance to be exposed to those research options before? And what have been the resources allocated for really solving those issues from the executive office, right? So there's some efforts done recently. I mean, I work also the ASCO Government Relations Committee, and I know there's some efforts, from the FDA to improve certain aspects, promoting, decentralized clinical trials, and also getting patients across state lines, maybe allowing Medicare and Medicaid patients to get access to trials now, because this is reimbursed, at least to get those options. But can we do something that is, much more connected? We have technology that we can invest in, and certainly that can make a difference for those patients.
Yeah. And I want to talk statistics a little bit here, because they're sort of startling, the ones that I've seen anyway. And please correct me if I have these wrong, but I believe it's like 80% of clinical trials fail to meet enrollment timelines. 2/3 of oncology studies fold before meeting their goals due to a lack of patients. Less than, I think it's 0.1% of cancer patients are enrolled in a clinical trial, and close to the same proportion are even offered the opportunity. All sorts of recruitment tactics, meanwhile, have been tried over the years. I've heard about engaging religious and community leaders and transporting patients to trials via Uber, and all kinds of creative social media campaigns, many of which position trial participants as heroes of some sort. And yes, yet inevitably nothing changes. Getting to the point that you're an oncologist and you care about patients, please, shed some light on what's kind of going on here.
Yeah, so I think that, the numbers that you're saying are fairly accurate. They're dismal. We know that. In a big opportunity, right? So I always want to see things from the, the angle of, the not scarcity, but abundance, right? So that means that there are 99.9% of patients that we can help if we just move the needle a little bit. So, the key challenge, as I see, is first, these campaigns have been done, and they're limited, right? The unfortunate reality of cancer care is that there's no happy customers, right? So if someone comes in the space, you are cured and that you don't want to hear about your cancer anymore. So, okay, thanks. And that's great, right? You can tell those exceptional responder stories, and for some it's inspiring, but that may not reflect into, clinical trials. That may reflect into innovations or newly FDA approved drugs, right? So they may think, I want this new drug that just came out because it was proven, but not necessarily, I want to get into this new innovative trial because I may get the same outcomes. Some patients do have that mindset, but it requires engagement, education, and kind of dispelling and demystifying the clinical trial journey for patients. And that hasn't been, I don't think really structured in a way that makes it easier for patients to understand. So many of them still come with the issue of like, oh, am I going to be a guinea pig? Or the clinical trial design hasn't been explained to tell them that actually most clinical trials don't have, an injection sham or a sugar pill, as long as you're getting the standard of care. So most trials in oncology ethically have been designed to get you the current treatment that you were going to get regardless, but maybe a chance to get something else, right? So you're never being put in that position that you are not getting at least the right treatment that you're supposed to get. And that is something that you have to engage every single time. So we as clinicians have even issues just explaining the standard of care treatment options to our patients. So imagine now trying to make it at scale. And that's why you need an external body that is not taking time from the office, right? So right now, just to screen a patient for myself is like 25 minutes. And what if the patient is not even eligible? So we need something that is connecting the dots, that is, as the trials are closing and the patients are not getting exposure to trials, you need to have an engine in the middle, something that is keeping, things, connected, patients are engaged, the physicians are not overburdened, that they don't want to make an extra click in that EHR, because we are, that's almost dead by attrition just by doing any more on the electronic health records. And at the same time, getting the patient fully engaged, understanding what the trial is, so we can create a virtuous cycle, an ecosystem that really gets patients, the clinical trials becomes almost by default the first option to think of, which in my mind, I drank the Kool-Aid because I see innovations, right? So to me, that should be the first option, no matter where you are. And the challenge is that we are not connecting everyone on the same framework. So imagine every single oncologist and cancer center in the nation will be thinking that clinical trials were the first thing they need to do, and you simply, click a button or do a way of a query and they get results and they get options, then there can be a healthy, exchange of opportunities for trials. You cannot have all the trials open in your own place and you don't know what's across the street for your patient. So if the patient is empowered and the center of the equation, then you have the opportunity to create a very, research-oriented ecosystem that is really going to make a difference. So, but we need alignment across. And I think the stories that you're mentioning, the efforts that you're doing are all logistical and kind of like one-time ebb and flow and disappear. We need a constant, like engine in the middle to make it happen.
Yeah, and I'm going to talk specifically about what Massive Bio is doing in this arena, or have you talk about that in just a minute. But before we jump there, I wanted to ask you about eligibility criteria. As you're probably aware, the FDA recently signaled its interest in seeing the eligibility criteria for cancer clinical trials be simplified and harmonized. And they have a publication of a framework for lung cancer studies in particular. And the idea is for that to be the backbone of upcoming draft guidance, which will sort of test the willingness of study sponsors to abide by the recommendations. Any thoughts about efforts on this front?
Yes, that's something that I'm very passionate about myself because I see it on my patients and patients also we help Massive Bio, is that um, we have become so used to do things the old way that we really have become stagnant in those criteria. And that's probably one of the main reasons why these efforts have come. And I welcome and applaud them all because at least there is some efforts from the FDA, from, advocacy groups. In this case, I believe Longevity and other were involved in making this from a patient's voice side on the advocacy groups. And also knowing that the NIH and the NCI, they really have come a long way to at least their own protocols on the NCTN network. They have tried to make them more accessible for across all patients, but industry, and I'm saying basically pharma, they follow a framework that has been always the same because they want to present things in front of the FDA that you get approval from, right? So the more standardized things are, the more chances you're going to pass the test, right? So you're submitting the trial design. So and the issue is that the copy paste process, even though it was helpful before, in the era of a very large portfolio of clinical trials, many different options, genomically, biomarkers, mechanism of action, and trials across all different hospital networks and sites of research, has really made it challenging now. So one of the examples is that they talk about brain metastases, right? So does it make sense if a patient has a very tiny metastases that we know is stable, it's not going to grow, it's not going to cause a problem? Why do we need to exclude the patient at that very point in time for the trial, or make them wait? Or having centralized labs when the CBC or the CMP that you're doing is equally as good because it's CLIA certified. You still do a standard of care, which is reflected over real world once the drug is approved. So it's not that you are replicating the conditions that happen on the trial when you start the patient on the drug in the real world post-approval. So are those things really necessary for patients to go through? And one example as well is also part of the intervention. So I know this is not the same as the inclusion and exclusion criteria, but it's also relevant. So right now, design of many of these trials have taken into consideration that you had to mimic everything that the intervention arm does when you're doing the investigational arm. So I just give you an example. There was a trial that we just recruiting, and the best available therapy, which was the control arm, was actually the same schedule of events and long PKs, day 1, day 8, day 15, to get the best available therapy that they can get with an oncologist just right in the corner. So why do I even want to get into a trial? I wouldn't, right? So anything I do is based on the perspective of what will I do myself or if my family was dealing with this. And I think having the FDA, now being flexible about it, it needs to create the effect that the pharma has to follow, and the medical directors and the therapeutic leads have to follow that and kind of get acquainted. But this, pharma is such a large and matrix structure that sometimes I talk to a therapeutic lead and they're on the innovation side, and then I talk to the other one for the same framework, but just different trial, maybe in a different country, and they are completely different. So I think we need that harmonization and flexibility, right? So I'm hopeful, but let's see what happens. I'm really looking forward that efforts such as making awareness of these changes really shift the industry into better eligibility and better access for patients.
Yeah. Well, there's things, our regulatory agencies to control, and there's things that our industries can control, and then there's what Massive Bio can do. So let's go there. Let's segue to what Massive Bio is doing. I'm going to kind of give you my little rollout of what I think I understand based on visiting your website, basically, that you co-founded this company in 2015 to directly address the core recruitment issues. And it looks like you're essentially hand-holding cancer patients through the process of finding the right trial based on the type of cancer they have and their age, overall health, and lab values, using technology powered by artificial intelligence to generate a free, personalized clinical trial matching report, and then sort of ushering them through the complex screening and enrollment process. I see you have a patient ambassador program where patients can share their cancer stories and trial experiences of one another, and a blog and various related services that you offer to trial sponsors and contract research organizations. So I'm hoping at this point you can share with listeners how you're working with patients and industry, and in what ways Massive Bio has had a measurable impact on recruitment for cancer trials and where it still needs to improve.
Yes. So no, thank you for that. And you hit it on the nail on things that we do. One of the things we're trying to do is to help as many patients and help them exactly where they are, right? We're talking about, equity, which is getting patients there. And many of those things could be solved by technology. So the frictions that are happening across the cancer journey, particularly from the clinical trial perspective, is many of them can be solved by just getting access to, for example, the medical records on time, that we can structure the data in the right way very quickly. And then we tell the patients on their living rooms, upon fingertips, where exactly those trial options are for them. And then we let the patient and their medical oncologist to identify those options. So things that we have been doing have helped identify clinical trials for over 100,000 patients now. So we started a program called the 100K Singularity Program, and it was aimed to help as many patients as possible and also make the system much better, because we want this to be super efficient. So we started with a few thousands, and then things just kind of exploded since then. What we do for patients is completely free. We want to help them to find options in real time across the journey. So, for example, if there's an opportunity for a testing that they never got, that maybe there's a trial available for them, we help them to get there. If there is an opportunity for them to maybe find a clinical trial upon progression, if they're on treatment right now, that's okay. We want patients to remain under treatment if that's if it's working. What we say: if it's not broken, don't fix it. You need to keep on that treatment. But you may be eligible in the future, so we set up alerts and we engage with the patients exactly at that point. Because as you may imagine and know, trials open and close, and also the patient's conditions open and close. So it's always that picture in time, right? It's like taking like a credit score, or when you are taking, this is tech, right? So we say it's like taking an Uber or Instacart, but in this case, we're getting patients from point A to point B in clinical trials, right? And having that big perspective of the whole ecosystem or research, where we can find those, deserts of clinical trials where these oases of patients, and really connect the dots. It's really making a difference for a lot of things. And that's what, pharma and CROs appreciate, because we help to accelerate their own portfolios, and while at the same time we're helping patients where without having to move sometimes from either their oncologist. We have been part of decentralized clinical trials. We have been part of just-in-time efforts, and my dream is that a patient is unfortunately diagnosed with cancer. They say, hey, Siri or Cortana or help me find a clinical trial, and then the system just does an e-consent, gets the records, which is what we're doing right now, screen them in 17 seconds, you have the options, and then have the patient, all the options in front of them, and get into the finish line, either getting, a drone coming in, giving them the treatment, or getting a home phlebotomy and getting the test needed, and then go to the treatment as soon as possible. So we have helped some patients sometimes as quickly as 72 hours from engagement with us. So that's something that that's a lofty goal, hopefully for a lot of patients, but that's the dream, and that we had to aim high if we want to help as many patients as possible. So that's what we're doing now.
And your platform's called Synergy, correct?
Yeah, Synergy AI, clinical trial matching solution.
Synergy, yeah.
Yeah.
And I just read the other day, literally the other day, I think it was last week, maybe, is it ARTURO AI? There's a new partnership that has to do with identifying cancer patients and getting them, to the right, matching them up correctly. Tell me how you're working with ARTURO or will be in moving forward. Like, how would this change your process or help it?
Yeah, so this is just an additional layer for us because we have been so patient-centric. Now we are trying to keep patients, in real time where they're going to see their appointment with their oncologist. So Azra right now, what they do is they use AI to, when a patient gets diagnosed with cancer, let's say the pathology from a biopsy comes with, adenocarcinoma, they immediately flag the patient and put it into a first appointment with the right oncologist. We are integrating ourselves with that process and not only getting them in front of the oncologist with a diagnosis, but also with the options that they have right now. So instead of spending the time and effort of a research coordinator that is just doing intake to see if maybe the patient is eligible, we tell them, actually, by the way, you have a trial in your own site in this same facility where you can be enrolling for. And if you need for the future, in the same network of hospitals, you can keep the patients in the same place without having to, go for extra co-pays or issues that happen sometimes when you go for clinical research. So the idea here is to align all those things in real time. So the patient, the oncologist, and the whole system of research gets help from Massive Bio. As you know, the great resignation happened with COVID. Now research resources are extremely valuable in any moment and time and effort that we can help those teams to actually deliver the care that the patients deserve can be, is to us is super valuable. So we want to help in that process.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Before coming on the show, I asked you to have a huddle with the Massive Bio team to come up with a best case example or two of how you've enabled equal access to clinical trials. So this is a big topic in the industry right now, as you know. So can you give me an example where there's sort of some lessons learned that might be, employed more broadly for the education of our audience here? And I'm anxious to hear what stories, rose to the top that you can share with listeners.
Yeah, actually, it's funny because I have a couple of stories, and then one came up last week that actually was much more interesting. So,
okay, go.
So yeah, and this is about social determinants of health and things related to access to patients to and meet them where they are, right? So equity is kind of like giving them the resources that they need to make it to where they need to be. So we had this patient, and it was like the whole we'll call enchilada of logistical barriers. So, fully eligible patient, right, had to travel across state lines for the clinical trial because there was nothing in the state of the patient. The patient had, at the time, no insurance that allowed them to move there, and also had 2 service dogs that needed to be accommodated in a van. So, because the patient has a disability, so we wanted to get the patient there fully eligible otherwise. And it was just Massive Bio. I was just talking with folks on the phone. Is like, okay, how are we going to get this van for 2 service dogs to get the patient? We have actually managed to get the patients sign up for Medicaid. The patient was able to get access to the trial through Medicaid approval, and also got them into the finish line, getting those, that car, the service dog, and not only that, but we save the out of pocket because typically you're not allowed to get reimbursement until you actually sign up the consent. So we facilitated the meet and greet with the team. They did the telehealth conference, which was a nurse, so it wouldn't require the license and things that happen these days with telemedicine. So the patient knew about the trial, was ready and able to go for the clinical trial, was fully eligible, was able to go across state lines because of the approval from insurance, and got in with the service dog. So, and you may say, okay, what's the tech about it? Well, when you're in the Instacart or you're in the Uber, then you get someone else coming in and you go to a different hotel or an add-on, or you need additional, flour for your cake and you're just doing the same thing and you click. This is the same that happens, right? We use the tech to enable the things that we can do, from extraction of data, from matching the patient, to understand the network of the sites and the opportunities for access because of insurance. But then we solve all those logistical things with the human component, and that's what makes the difference. And we call that the last mile team. So for us, this was like a full opportunity for equity, because this patient was from a diverse population, was underinsured, have this disability. So it cannot check all the boxes. And I felt this is a great example of how we actually making a difference for one patient at a time. But the good news is that we can do it at scale, right? So when things are not scalable, that's the issue. But we're lucky and fortunate that we're able to do this in for many patients. So we're proud and happy for that.
Yeah, sounds like the worst case scenario, but you turned it into a best case example. So
Exactly,
thank you
that's
for
extreme,
that.
of course.
Well, your creative hands-on approach to the problem sounds foolproof, Arturo, and likely explains the soaring popularity of this platform, this Synergy platform with cancer patients. Thanks for being on the show today, and thanks for the work you do that stands to benefit literally millions of people around the world dealing with this much-dreaded diagnosis.
Oh my God, thank you so much for the opportunity to share our experiences. And we just invite everyone to be part of this. We are in collaboration, right? So we basically work with anyone who is really interested in helping patients to match to clinical trials and really make the cancer infrastructure much more efficient. So thank you for the time today.
Absolutely. And as always, a big thank you to everyone out there for listening in. If you like this conversation, it is only a glimpse of what you can expect from Scope US, February 6th through the 9th in sunny Orlando, Florida. It is always one of the biggest gathering spots for the clinical research community around collaboration and innovation. And you can register online using discount code SOT23, that's SOT23, and receive 15% off any current registration rate. Simply visit scopesummit.com. Bye for now.